We all think we know the story of Daniel in the lion's den, right? But what if I told you the lions aren't even the most important part of the story? Seriously, today we're going to dig into Daniel chapter 6 and pull out this incredible, often missed message about what real faith looks like.
So the story gets going with this guy, Daniel. And he's not just any guy. He's a man of such incredible integrity, so good at his job that he's about to be put in charge of the whole kingdom.
Well, you can probably guess what happens next. The other officials, they get super jealous. They can't find a single thing wrong with his work, so they decide to get creative. They're going to use the one thing they know he won't compromise on, his faith, to set the perfect trap.
And they do. They totally trick the king into signing this law that can't be changed. And just like that, Daniel gets a death sentence. For what? For praying. Just for praying to his God. And the sentence is, being thrown into a den of hungry lions.
Okay, so we all know how this ends, right? The miracle happens. But hang on. The real tension, the part that I think has the most to teach us, is everything that happens before the miracle. And it all starts with what a desperate king says.
So, picture this. Daniel is being dragged off to the lion's den, and King Darius, the guy who was tricked into this whole mess, but who really genuinely respects Daniel, he says something. And these words, they are absolutely key to understanding the whole story.
Now, at first glance, it sounds like this amazing statement of faith, doesn't it? You know, the king, totally confident, making this bold promise over his best guy. But is that really what's happening here?
To get what's really behind the king's words, you have to look at what he was doing right before he said them. And his actions, well, they paint a completely different picture.
I mean, the king tried everything. The Bible says he spent the whole day desperately trying to find a way out for Daniel. He's looking for legal loopholes. He's arguing with his advisors. He's trying to bend a law that was designed to be unbreakable. And he fails. So those words he speaks, they're not a victory cry. They're the last desperate gasp of a defeated man. It's like he's saying, look, I'm out of options. I couldn't save you. Maybe your God can.
And if you need more proof, just look at what he does that night. He goes back to his palace, can't eat, refuses all entertainment, can't sleep a wink. Does that sound like a guy who's just chilling, waiting for a miracle he's sure is going to happen? No way. This is a man who was being eaten alive by fear and guilt.
And then, at the crack of dawn, his uncertainty is just on full display. He runs to the den, and what does he shout? It's not, "I knew it, you made it." Nope. He calls out with this really pained, anxious voice and asks if Daniel's God was even able to save him. He's hoping, for sure, but you can tell he doesn't really believe it's possible.
Okay, so the king's hope, it's all based on desperation. But here's the cool thing. That's not the only kind of faith we see in the book of Daniel. Let's actually contrast this with a totally different response we see a few chapters earlier.
Check out this comparison. It's fascinating. On one side, you've got King Darius, and his whole focus is on the outcome. Your God will deliver you. It's a demand, almost. But then you look at Daniel's friends, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, when they were facing that fiery furnace. They say God is able to save them, but then they add that crucial line, but even if he does not, they acknowledge God's power, but also his absolute freedom to choose.
And that right there, that's the huge difference. Their faith couldn't be shattered by what happened next, because it wasn't built on getting a specific outcome. Their confidence wasn't in the rescue, it was in the rescuer. It was anchored to the character of God himself, no matter what.
All right, so we've heard from the desperate king, and we've heard from Daniel's faithful friends. But what about the man of the hour, Daniel? What does he have to say as he's facing certain death?
This part is honestly pretty wild. In the middle of all the chaos, the king's freaking out, his enemies are gloating, he's got a death sentence hanging over his head. Daniel says nothing, not a word. There's no big speech, no recorded prayer where he declares what God is going to do, just silent, trusting obedience. You see, his faith, just like his friend's faith, didn't need to shout about the result. It was content to just rest in the unshakable character of God, period, whether that meant rescue or not.
And this is where it all comes together. This gets us to the absolute heart of the story, what it's trying to teach us about God's total control, what the Bible calls his sovereignty, and how our faith fits into that.
It's so easy to look at a story like this, with a happy ending, and think that God's sovereignty just means we're guaranteed a rescue every time things get tough. But that's actually a pretty big misunderstanding of what the word even means.
Real sovereignty, what the Bible teaches, means that God is in complete control, that he is never absent, and that his wisdom is perfect, no matter what the outcome looks like from our perspective. He's always working, even when we can't see it.
And that brings us to the real takeaway. Think about it. Daniel was faithful before he had any idea he'd be saved. His faith didn't kick in when the lions' mouths were shut. It was already there. It didn't depend on a miracle. His faithfulness, his choice to obey, that was his worship, and it was directed at God, not at getting a specific result.
Once you grasp that, it completely changes how you see the whole story, especially the miracle.
So what's the bigger miracle here? Is it shutting the mouths of a bunch of hungry lions? I mean, that's an incredible display of power, no doubt. But maybe the deeper miracle, the one that's even more amazing, is the one that happened in Daniel's heart before he even saw a lion. It's that quiet, steady, unwavering faith that says, I will honor God no matter what. And that kind of leaves us with a big question to chew on, doesn't it? What is our own faith really anchored to? The rescue or the rescuer?